All right, welcome back, everyone. We are now going to talk about useful and practical things. So obviously, that's a bit of a mouthful. Let's see if I can deliver on this. We have a full room here. People were defying the storm in Finland. It wasn't too bad, right? It was okay. We had to actually extend with another row of chairs. So we have a packed room here in the conference, which is lovely. So thank you guys for being here. I'm here to tell you a few obvious things and see how many of you agree with them. So the Azure Platform is a really, really big place nowadays. And when, cost starts piling up, and because time is money, you kind of need to handle the fluff. You kind of need to handle the cloud platform. And all the companies that I work with kind of have this issue that they only see a fraction of the things that they could be doing with the Azure platform. So this story is going to be about that. I'm going to start with you guys, though, and I know you're a Finnish audience. You're very similar to a Swedish audience. We don't actually interact with the speaker. So I'm going to force you guys a little bit. We're going to do some light stretching here in this room in the morning here, and it's going to involve hand raising, okay? So don't be scared. We'll do it together, okay? So raise your hand if you've been to IglooConf before. All right, that's less than half. So a lot of newcomers. Thank you guys for coming, and you guys for coming back to actually listen to us again. Oh my God, thank you for returning. That's crazy. We have, and as a company, and this is the next question, we are running something in production in Azure. That is a lot. Oh my God, I've been asking this question for years, literally, and in the beginning it was like, a few, nobody, and now it's like everyone, almost, right? You're in production in Azure, congratulations, that's awesome. And then I went to the homepage for this lovely conference and I saw these great logos. So anyone representing any one of the sponsoring companies, raise a hand, keep it up. And those of you who have 2 hands available, give the rest of the guys an applause. All right. So now we're kind of in the groove, yeah? Okay, and as you all know, I'm Magnus Martinsson. You saw that on the schedule. I am an Azure MVP. I've been that since the beginning of Azure. And I'm also what Microsoft like to call a regional director, which is a bit of a funky title. I don't work for Microsoft. I work for my own company, Loftysoft. But Microsoft gives out these titles, and I don't work for Microsoft, and I don't have a region, and I don't direct anything. But it means I'm a buddy of Microsoft. So if you have any fun feedback or any stories that you want to tell me about how the world works using Microsoft products, come and talk to me. I love this stuff. Also, another thing that I love to do with my friends, there are a couple of friends from the Global Azure Bootcamp organization are here today. Have anyone here been to a Global Azure Bootcamp event? Attended one? Yes, several. That's great. Well, obviously you guys have. The speakers up front probably organize Global Azure Bootcamp every year. On April 27 this year, we will have the next Global Azure Bootcamp, and there's going to be one here in Helsinki, right? You guys are organizing. There's going to be like 300 locations worldwide for the Global Azure Bootcamp on this day, and about 15,000 people attending, learning about Azure on this day. Like, there's people in Kenya, in Nepal, and everywhere, and it's pretty spectacular. So you guys should check that out. As you all gathered, I work with Azure all the time. That's what I do. My customers range from these teeny tiny companies, like I literally go down to, I've gone down a basement ramp to a basement company with just a couple of people, to huge enterprises, right? So I work with large companies. So, and it doesn't matter if you're this teeny tiny company and you don't know anything about Azure or how it works, or if you're this huge enterprise and you still don't know anything about how Azure works, right? It doesn't matter. They all share the same challenges. And I work with these companies, and I see this all the time. And what I wanted to do for this presentation is give you guys a bit of that, the stuff that you should be knowing about, right? Some of the things that we'll cover, for instance, too many people have too much access, right? Give everyone access. All of them, no problem. How do I know when something is wrong in Azure? How do I know what's going to happen when something is not working the way it's intended in Azure? Can I find out? Yes. And then my favorite question, whose database is that? Do you know? Is it your database? Whose is it? You know what you do, right? When you find a database that nobody knows whose it is, you shut it off and you see who comes running, right? You delete it, you take a backup and delete it, and then somebody goes like, ah! You hear somebody screaming down the hall, and it's like, now I know whose it is. And in between my little segments here, I'm going to do several stories or several different segments. I'm going to give you sort of the best, worst kept secrets, if you will, of the Azure platform. And in between each, we're going to do a hand-raising exercise, okay? And I'm going to ask you also as well, I'm going to give you a heads up on this. I need you to close your eyes and do a hand-raising exercise so you can be honest, okay? Yeah. And we'll get back to that. Let's start with the first one. The best, worst kept secret, number 2, and there's nothing wrong with my numbering system, it's just I put them in sort of size order. So policies. A policy in Azure is a customized rule which governs the shape of your resources. And it sounds a bit abstract. What happens when you deploy something to Azure is that the policies are executed, evaluated, and you can deny a deployment request, or you can change it, modify it, append it. Either way, it's always going to generate an audit log for you. So you can listen to that audit log and see who changed what to what in Azure in all your resources. This is really handy. One of these policies is a bit of just a little blob of JSON, right? So you can pretty much read, I'll show you a couple. It's if some condition, then deny the request or something. So I'll show you how that works in action. I have some screenshots, but I think I'll try and show you this in the portal. Here's the Azure portal in full screen mode. It's a little funky to show it in full screen mode, but yeah. And I've already opened up a create storage account flow, and I've pre-filled in the information here. So I'll click next. I'll go to the tags section. I can add tags now to many resources in the Azure portal when I create them, but let's skip that. And when I do, policies are evaluated, and if everything works as intended, it comes back and it says the validation failed. Click here to view details. And the details is that there is a policy violation because deployment of the storage account requires a cost center tag. Okay, so I'll go back to the previous step and I'll put a cost center, and then like Igloo is paying for this. And then we'll go to the next step, and the evaluation should pass. So even actually before the portal will validate, before I even press the deploy and the create button, the portal will run the policies that I have already pre-installed on my subscription and make sure that the things that I set up are properly configured. So that can be really, really handy, so that everyone within the organization is now forced to tie a cost center to the resources that are costing actual money for the company. Really handy thing. So that's how policies, that's the idea of policies. And just to be sure, I had some screenshots of that same thing. Actually, let me show you that audit trace. So if the activity log here, I tried to deploy one, I think that did that yesterday, and I took this screenshot saying that there is an audit trace entered in the audit logs so that I can go back and see who tried to do what, and then it failed. And then you can go and help them out and say, yeah, well, so we require a cost center tag, and you can figure stuff out. So you'll get a better structure of things when you do that. So here's the one that I ran just now, exactly this one. If there isn't a field called tags, which has the key, contains key cost center, then the effect is to deny the request. That's the policy. And you can do that with a lot of stuff. You can have a range of available values. Like there has to be a cost center needs to be one of the following 4 cost centers. You can, and this is, by the way, this is a bad manager version, right? The effect, if you don't follow the rules, it's deny. And here's the nice manager version. It's a little longer, but if there is a tag, if tags exist, there should be a cost center tag. If there isn't, then append the deployment with the cost center R&D. This is a good thing to put on the R&D subscriptions or on the R&D resource groups where people are creating and deleting resources all day long. I mean, they're R&Ding. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But it'd still be nice to tally up the cost of R&D. And so you can append and change a request using policy. And here's another one just for, you can do with lots of different things. Here's location. You can only deploy in Europe, is what this policy would do. And I have another one as well, and that's for resource locks. I just want to show you that real quick as well. It's not a policy, but it's another feature of Azure unless you're using it already. Let me see if I can recall where I put my locked resource. Oh, wait, I have that as one of my websites. I deployed a few resources for this conference, so I had stuff to play with here. I have a couple of web applications and so forth. And if I go to this web application, it should have what's called a lock. This is not a policy, but it is another feature. So this feature is locked. It's read-only. So if I go to the application settings, and I want to change something here, let's say I want to go and do, actually I can't change anything. So if I try and change this, oh my God, this app has a read-only lock. What? I can't change it? That's weird. Okay, let's go and see if we can do something about that. If I really want to change it, I created myself a little script here which removes the lock. So I can unlock a resource. Let's see if I can do that. Unlock a resource. I'm removing the lock. I can do this from the portal, but I think the portal is missing a feature right now to do this in a good-looking way. So the resource doesn't have any locks anymore because I removed it. And then I can go to my app settings, and now we can do like, hey, we need, something else on this site. We need to have PHP, I don't know, some other version, and save that change. All of these changes that I'm making are audited. So there is an audit trace of all of this. No matter what you do, it's going to be audited. And the activity log will show, removing the lock, will show the change and what you did to the resources. And when you're a large organization, that's really something that you want to be following, that change feed of your resources. And I'll go back now and relock my resource. And again, the resource will now be locked. So now it's read-only again. That's a really good thing to do because you don't want everyone to just randomly start changing things. Of course, people can, if they have access enough, they can remove the lock and then make a change, but at least that'll make them think. Because I don't know how many times I've seen customers that have a QA environment and a production environment in Azure, and they're not the same, right? Because random people have access and they change stuff. And they shouldn't be doing that, but that happens anyway. So that's, oh my God, so many things I have debugged because of this. So now it's time for this honest moment. Policy, I'm going to tell you how we're going to do this. You're going to close your eyes and you're going to, by show of hands, right? If you've used a policy anytime, you'll raise a hand, and you'll do like a peace sign or something cool like that. And if you haven't, you'll just make another movement, you'll just do a face palm, okay? Right? So I've never used a policy, you do a face palm. But everyone close their eyes so you can be honest and you don't have to like, okay? So 1, 2, 3. There's a few hands coming up, but there's a lot of face palms. All right, yes. I figured there'd be a bunch of face palms, but yes, I'm happy to see that some people are working with policy. It's good. It's really healthy. And the cool thing about policy is that policy is also JSON, and you can have a repository of files containing policies, and you can like run a script which applies them all, and you can really automate this process, and you should be doing that. Best worst kept secret number 4, naming conventions. Does anyone in here use a naming convention for their resources in Azure? You do? A lot of people do. That's great. What good is a naming convention? What do you use it for? Anyone? I know it's a tough question, right? Sorting. Sorting, good. Production and testing separation. That's a brilliant answer. So what I like to do is go to the Azure portal and do something like that. I know that my Igloo resources are prefixed Igloo, so I can do that. I can go and find my Igloo resources. If I wanted to find a VM, I can probably do that as well. Oh, I have a VM. That's good. Right? So that works in the portal, of course, when you're searching and sorting and trying to figure stuff out. And to create a good naming convention, you could do something like this. This is just a sample. A prefix, you don't have to have one, but it's kind of useful. A location, maybe. I've seen people use, but some people argue, well, everything has a location. Yes, but it's so much easier to just type sort of a location name and you get all the resources in one location. Which environment? Like the gentleman said over here, production. What is this? This is the intra-web, intra-site internal service, and then what kind of resource? These are things you could have in a naming convention. You don't have to have all of this stuff. But with this, you can get the foo US West tests intra-web resource. You can get the foo Australia East demo customer database. You can get the bar EU West dev portal storage account, right? I mean, it's right, it's like a little sentence. It's right there. So I don't really care which naming convention you use. You just get one, right? Just whatever works for you. But it's nice to have a naming convention to sort of lean back on. And it makes it easier to find your resources. You're going to go to the portal and you're going to go and find some web application and you want to do it quickly to get that dashboard up. And it's easier if you have a naming convention. But I've seen some horrible scenarios where people don't have naming conventions and they just enumerate the resources or some crazy thing like that. Database 1, database 2 is like, what are you doing? Yes, question. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good observation. It's yes, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's a good observation. That it's not super easy to do. It needs that you kind of stick to it, even if it doesn't always make perfect sense. Sometimes you have to use lower cases for a storage account name, and they have to be globally unique and all that, and that can kind of trip you up for sure. You had 2 things. Yeah, absolutely. Renaming resources is a bit of a pain there. Yes, I definitely agree. The customer changes their name or there's something changes and you have to go and rename stuff, and that can be a pain. I agree with that for sure. So it's not always easy to do the right thing, but you should do it anyway. So I have never used a naming convention in Azure. That's a facepalm. I definitely use naming conventions in Azure. That's like a peace sign. All right, 1, 2, 3. Almost everyone does this. This is really cool. I think that's kind of normal to do this, and that's really great. Good to know. Anyways, the worst kept secret number 5 is autoscaling. I cannot tell you how many times people are just not using that. And they're happy to pay Microsoft lots of more money because they're just not flipping a switch. literally, right? And that is just weird. It's the weirdest thing. So of course you all know that vertical scaling is when you make your hardware larger. You can do that, of course, if you want to pay more money with fewer hardware instances. But what we really want to achieve, if we can, is this ability to scale out and in, to add and remove instances when we need them. And we don't want to sit there and manually add them. We want that to automatically happen, of course. There are some challenges with auto-scaling, and let's just run through a few of them. If you do this, if you require session state to be to a specific instance of server, in the olden days, what we would do is we would have this ARR affinity cookie attached to each request, so that every request that comes to a server farm from one client will go to the same instance of server. This is a bad idea when you're auto-scaling, okay? You have to break out of that and be able to remove that cookie. That's one of the things you need to do. What you really want to be able to see is the performance, even though you're changing the number of instances. And that can actually trip you up a little bit on those diagrams. You see the scale of the performance. It's difficult for Microsoft to draw a diagram based on a different number of instances. So when you're scaling, those diagrams will be a little bit off. So that will trip you up sometimes. That all of a sudden it's like you have less capacity, and it's not really true. It's just a different number of instances, and so that can be tricky. And what you really also want to do when you auto scale. Some people are happy to set, we'll use 5 instances of the web application and we'll pay for those 5 instances all the time, which is actually stupid. I'm sorry to say, but it really is. You should not be doing that because then, during the weekend or whenever nobody's really using your service, you're still paying for 5 instances when you should be running maybe just 1, right? That's a fifth of the cost. So you can and you should probably deploy auto-scaling with a template. In Azure, you can go and deploy things with a nice template. And here is one which has an auto-scale section on it. Let's go back to this is unless you know this in code is sorry. There is this is Visual Studio Code, and then there is a mode which you can get into. It's really nice. It's the Zen mode. You just press Control-K and then Z, and you go into Zen mode, which is lovely. You'll see a full screen. So this is an auto-scale piece of resource which you can deploy. It's Microsoft Insight's auto-scale settings, and you can see here that you can set the capacity of your auto-scaling. You can have your triggers based on like a metric, a CPU percentage or something. And then whenever that occurs, you're going to scale to an additional instance or scale in again. Now, if you go to the Azure portal these days, all of that stuff has been centralized under the monitor. And actually, monitor was the thing I talked about when I was here last. I'll show you a couple of new things in monitor since then. But in Monitor, auto-scale is centralized now. So you can find all your auto-scaling in one place. Very convenient. And in there, of course, you can go and change your auto-scale settings for your application. In this case, I just put some random numbers in there. And it really is, in theory, on paper, it's that easy, right? But it's maybe not always super easy to do this in reality. But I've seen so many companies run so many sites, so many fixed number of instances that it's ridiculous. We're just giving away money at that point. So when you do this, you need to monitor availability and responsiveness of your application, and you need to set up this alerting on the scale events. Because if your site keeps scaling out to many instances, you're paying for more instances, and there should be a reason for that happening. If you're fortunate, yay, lots of users are using your service, and that's awesome, lots of business for you, great. You're scaling out because you need more capacity. But what if you're scaling out because somebody else, obviously not you, somebody else deployed some crap code which eats a lot of resources? You need to find that out. You need to know and go and fix that problem. Go over to Dave's office and kick his chair and say, Dave, what the hell did you do? You deployed something and all of a sudden we need more resources. This is costing us actual money. And you need to go and optimize. So when you're doing auto scaling, you should definitely alert on the scale events and you should figure out why are we scaling. Could be a good thing and that you are scaling and then it's time to celebrate, right? All right, moment of truth. I was being a little bit hurtful and insulting regarding people who don't use auto scaling. So I apologize for that in case you work in an organization where you're not using auto scaling. But not using auto scaling is a facepalm. Using auto scaling is a peace sign. All right, 1, 2, 3. There's a bunch of face palms. I figured, and that's okay. It's okay to be honest in here, because honestly, this whole purpose here for me today is to show some things that may be obvious to some people. And if you go from this session as like all the things, I did all the things. That's great, and you can buy me a beer later and tell me about that, in case you're doing all the things. But I would venture that many of you and many of us are not we're not doing it. It's right there, it's so obvious, but it's not happening. So, the next one is the best, worst kept secret number 6. Alerting. There's a couple of things that are really annoying when you're doing alerting. One is to remember to actually do it. Yeah, I'm not kidding. People are setting up resources all the time, and they don't remember to apply those alerts. It's just not a thing that they think about. And then much later, it's like something is broken, the customer is calling, and you kind of have this alert system where when your customer checks in with you and say, hey, your site is down. That's when you know it's down, so you go and fix it. Well, maybe, probably, hopefully, you'll get away from that at some point and start to actually get the alerts before the customer calls. So when the customer actually does have to call you and say, hey, your site is down, you go like, yeah, we're looking at it right now, we're fixing it, and so forth. Right? That's much better. That's a better conversation to have. I've literally had the conversation about having this conversation with customers, saying like, you like it when they call and tell you your stuff is broken? You know, the answer shouldn't be, oh, really, is it broken? I need to go and check that. That's not really customer confidence right there, right? So you have to practically manage and handle these alerts. And that can be a pain to have yet another concern, another thing that we have to do all the time. But also one more thing. I worked with this company and they set up alerts. They did what I told them to do. I showed them here's how to set up alerts, and they did that. And then nobody was checking that inbox where the emails went for the alerts. I was like, really? Why are we doing this? So this is an organizational thing now. You have to have within your organization, if you have production applications that need to be up and so forth, and it's important and it's like business critical, you have to have a response team which actually listens to these signals, right? Otherwise, there's no point. And that's an organizational challenge, right? So the good thing about alerts is that they are also Azure resources. So you can get your alerts as Azure resources, and you can get alert groups as Azure resources. You can specify teams or whatever that is, which will respond to alerts. In this case, this alert will configure to send out emails when there's an alert. You can use SMS or webhooks or whatever you want. You can send information to a Logic app or an Azure function when there's an alert, and then call into your code and do some mitigating steps whenever something is wrong. So you can create a library of alerts, and you can deploy these alerts to whatever resources you have. So you'll do Yeah, there's a resource reference here. You can set an alert to that and so forth. So that's how you practically do it. Oh, right, there's a next demo is in the portal as well. We might as well do it when we're here. Alerts are also centralized under the monitor in Azure. So you go and click monitor and then alerts. And you'll see that there's indeed one alert firing here. I think I set it up on one of my web applications. Whenever the CPU is less than 99%, you send an alert. And I think I got to go and clean an inbox after this presentation because there should be a lot of alerts in there because this is continuously firing, obviously, to just show you that there is an alert. But what you do is you manage your alert rules. Also, you can do that in the portal. This is an alert saying the site is cold. It's IglooConf, so the site is cold, makes sense. When the CPU is less than 99% on this site. So from in here, you can, in one place again, find your resource, whatever resource you're working with, set up this alerting condition, and then define and select your action groups to do this, some response when alerts are happening. So I have a demo alert group here, which is going to get an email. And you can easily then set up your new action groups and have them respond. Give me a second to load, yeah. And have that respond with, again, like a webhook or something. Something gets called, maybe SignalR, and push a notification to an application or something like that when a specific condition that your undesirable conditions are happening in Azure you might want to attend to, right? There's a sudden rise in the number of server errors on one of your web applications. That's probably something you need to take a look at because that shouldn't happen. And if that happens, nice to get an alert. And here's a bit of a war story is whenever something new goes wrong, which have never gone wrong before, right? There's something deployed, some change, and all of a sudden there's a problem, a real, critical scenario in your business. Maybe for one of our cases, we found out that there was something wrong in our code, and it took us a couple of months to find and remove this problem. But we found out that when the thread count did a sudden rise on the server, we had a problem, and we actually had to go, unfortunately, and reboot servers for a while until we were able to fix the problem. But at least we were able to set an alert we found like a reasonable threshold. It was like 120 threads. And whenever we went above that, we got an alert immediately so we could respond and be active and take care of the problem. So whenever you find a new issue, maybe one that you didn't have before, but now all of a sudden there is an issue, there should be two things happening in your organization. One is you should fix the problem. That's one good thing to do. And the second task, which many people forget about, is now you should be setting up an alert. So whenever or if ever that happens again, you should be notified by it. Okay? That kind of makes sense. Those two go together. It's a pair, right? Maybe it's critical to fix the problem, but make sure you don't have to fix the problem critically next time again. Because, if you do it 3 times, then the joke's on you. So, unified alerting, and I'm going to be a little bit, let's see, I have slides of this stuff as well, because I wanted to make sure the internet gods and all these things worked. So, I'm going to show you one more thing about alerting and about actually monitoring, kind of based on the backstory of this whole monitor experience that we're seeing now. I talked about monitoring last time I was here, and I was kind of involved with these people at Microsoft doing some major refactorings and changes to monitoring. And this image that I've chosen here, it's not Windows. Well, it is a window, but it's a single pane of glass is what it is. So this is the single pane of glass story, and it's been feedback that MVPs have been given for years, and I believe lots of other people have been given as well. And it's the thing that we want to have just one place to go to view all the issues with my service, right? We want to have like just one dashboard. You can create dashboards in the Azure portal, of course. That's cool. That's really handy. But something more actionable, maybe, that we can do things with, not just blinking lights behind a panel that you can't do anything with. We want dials and knobs and things we can tweak. So Microsoft are working now on the Azure Monitor space for resource groups, okay? So Azure Monitor for resource groups, what's this? I have an application resource group here, which I chucked a bunch of resources in there, just in a pile. Maybe I normally wouldn't have my app resources in a pile like this, but at least we get a full set of resources in here. There's a VM and a couple of websites and and some stuff. And any one of these resources, and this is my application right now, any one of these could have an issue, an alert, something, right? I can set up some dashboards to monitor that. Sure, I can. What I can also do is I can go here. I can centrally see my alerts, and it's actually the same alert view, which I saw under Monitor Alerts. It's the same one, except scoped to only this resource group. And I can click on Insights Preview, and I can see this. This is a list of the resources, and you can see the alert. It's happening. It's right there, so I can see it's like a little dashboard where I can do things here. So I can see that this resource is set up for application insights. I can find the metrics on it, and there's actions that I can do on this resource. Let me actually zoom in on that. So I can do actions on this resource right from here. And the other one below here, I haven't set that up. It's my second web application. So you can see the alert. The site is cold. The other web application, I haven't set that up. You see that the light bulb is not purple, it's black. So if I go into actions there, I can't check the failures and the performance and that sort of stuff because it's not enabled on this resource. But I can go and add a specific alert right from here if there is something happening that I need to be alerting about. But I can also go from in here and enable the application insights, configure that setting from this view. And there's more stuff that's going to come in here eventually, because this, in case you didn't see it, it is preview. Right? So this is preview stuff in the Azure portal right now, and currently they're working on a resource group scope. But the next obvious scope after that would be something like a tag, or whatever n resources that I want to put in the same list. I'll create my own list of resources. Thank you. Right? And I'll get this sort of a actionable dashboard. And again, more stuff will happen here as the story unfolds. But I think it's pretty cool and pretty actionable, if you will. So if you have never before seen the unified alerting section under the Azure Monitor, you've never been in there, that's a face palm. I have used the Azure Alerts, the new version of the Azure Alerts. We're using them in my organization right now. That's like a power fist, okay? 1, 2, 3. Bunch of power fists, but there are certainly people who are willingly admitting with a face palm. I know. All right, so the best worst kept secret number 3, I've already shown you tagging. Sorry? Oh, yes, question. Alerting and policies, yes. Can you apply? Oh, wow, that is a great question. I was not going to talk about that. Let's go off script because, that's what I do. And let's see, I think I have a couple of slides that I was hiding. I'm going to go and do that right now. Yeah, see, there's a couple of slides that I was hiding. I knew that was going to come up. If I don't make it to the last slide, this is a great question, and we're going to do that. So off script. Management groups is a new feature of Azure. I don't know if you know about this one, but I decided to maybe not talk about that today, but screw it. What's in a number of slides? Let's add some. So management groups is sort of a new feature in Azure. When you create a management group, you have to create a root management group. It's going to be the root group of your tenant, your AD tenant. And then you can create sub-management groups, like a little tree. That's exactly what it's intended for. And you can attach your subscriptions underneath these. And what's really cool about that is that management groups combined with this other feature of Azure called Blueprints. And Blueprints itself is a preview. And honestly, it's not working super great right now. That's a little part of the reason why I didn't want to, I don't have a good demo. I can show you where to find it, and you can start fiddling around with it. And there's also even remediation steps that you can create. And they're working on this right now. It's preview stuff. But the point of this little story is, and I'll show you in the portal where you do this, is that you can create a set of policies, a set of things that needs to be applied within your organization. And you can attach this blueprint at any level inside of this hierarchy. So you can set it at the root level. You can have root policies that always apply across the organization all the time. And you can apply that. And then you can apply it, first of all, you can apply it after the fact. So you can go home and do this now, right? And when you find you add a new policy, which you haven't had before, you will find after the fact which resources are not compliant with the policy that you just added. So you can go and fix those resources and make them adhere to this policy. And then whenever anyone else creates a new resource in the future, the policy will apply. Additionally, because the fact that you now have one step, normally like before, maybe if you have never seen this, you thought that subscription was the top level. It's not anymore. This is the top level. Actually, the root up there is the actual top level. You can have excuse me, one set of policies for these subscriptions and one set of policies for those subscriptions. And if you go tomorrow and create a whole new subscription and create a VM in that subscription, and there's a policy of how you create VMs, you have to use some sort of thing, whatever that is. If you go and attach your subscription in this tree, automatically the policies will apply for that subscription as well, which is fantastic. And now I'm regretting that I didn't bring this up, and I love your question because now we get a chance to talk about this. Yes?
I have even a worse question.
A worse question, do it.
You didn't mention deploy if not exists.
Deploy if not exists for policies? I don't know exactly. So there's deploy. Sorry, yeah. Deploy if not exists and you can put policies and things. You can put artifacts inside of your blueprints. Okay, so that means that whenever anyone creates a new subscription, maybe then it'll create a resource group and a bunch of resources, and there are some things that have to exist in every resource group, in every subscription. So you can have those kinds of policies as well. You can push it pretty far. But again, some of this stuff is preview and a little shaky. That readily admit to that. But I'll show you. There's a whole section for management groups, and when you go in there and create your management groups and stuff, if you have a demo management group, when you go in there and do that, you have to be like the Uber admin of all things to be able to set up this structure, and then you can dial people in and give them access to start helping you with building this stuff. So my demo management group has just one subscription in it, and there are some policies that I have applied in the demo management group. There's actually no assignment. There are no assignments in this scope. That's a little weird. So you can see if I'm complying, if my resources, my setup is in compliance with all the policies that I have. You can find that out here, and it should be like, there should be red stuff. Let me see if I can switch over to, I think I set up a demo on my other subscription as well. So let's go over to, let's go over there. Let's see if I can get, two resources selected. Anyways, I didn't have this fully prepared, as you can see. This is off script. But yeah, you can assign a policy in here. You can have, there's a list of policies that Microsoft have already created that you can use. But you can also do your own policies, your own custom policies, and you can apply those. And here's the require cost center tag policy, which you saw before. So I was setting that up in here, and blueprints down here is in preview. And you can create a blueprint, you can apply the blueprint to a scope. I have a couple of blueprint definitions. There's one here. Blueprints, you can change them, you can version them, you can publish different versions of the blueprints, you can apply a certain version of the blueprint to a certain place. Like, there's lots of stuff happening in here. And in fact, I have a blueprint artifact. There's a resource group called Blueprint Artifacts, automatically deployed, and I am giving access, I'm giving read access to a specific demo group on this resource group. So there's things you can set up with artifacts, with policies, with actionable things that happen once you just apply this to your organization, and here you go, right? Pretty cool. So now I am pressed for time, but I love these questions. And I don't care if I don't make it to the last slide. If you want to see my last slides, buy me a beer. And you notice there's a theme to my requests? Oh my God. That'd be entertainment. So I have tagging and an RBAC remaining. Yeah, I'll go through tagging really quick just with slides, because this is the worst kept secret number 3, and we need to talk more, spend the last minutes talking about the really important one. So, who owns that database, right? Can I have cost control? Yes, indeed you can. You can apply tags to all your resources, and I think most of you know this. And there's a maximum, though, of 15 tags per resource or resource group in Azure. The cool thing is that the name of the tag, the key, can be 512 characters. For some reason, the value can be 256. I'm not sure who set that up. I've never seen a key that needs 512 characters. But anyways, in the portal, you go and set up whatever tags, and you can filter by tags, you can search by tags, and you should definitely be applying tags. There's a demo here for tagging resources. You should be doing that with your templates, right? When you deploy using templates, which you always do, right? You should always have the tags follow along with that. And the really big benefit of tagging, the tagging system, is that you can easily group and find your resources, and the tags follow along all the way down to the actual invoice that you get at the end of the month. So you can see cost by tag, right? That's why cost center and which environment and which application you're working with, all these things you might want to have as tags, so that the bean counters, the Excel people, they can go nuts with that and just figure out how much are we spending on R&D versus demo environments versus production in the US, and what's the cost of things. That's what you do with tagging. And also one more thing, that you can temporarily tag things. That's really cool. Temporarily tag things because you're doing inventory or something. Just use a tag for it, and then you're done when there's no other resource that isn't tagged with a certain temporary tag. Anyway, so that clarifies billing, and it rolls up costs for you so that you can see the cost of resources sharing a specific set of tags. Our organization is not using tags. That's a facepalm. Our organization is certainly using tags all the time. That's a peace sign. 1, 2, 3. Lots of face palms. No, but tagging is important, and it should be applied religiously, because that's the way you sort of organize all your things. It's just how you do it. So, the best, worst kept secret number 1, and I think I have plenty of time to talk about this, which is good. It's role-based access control. So the problem with role-based access control is that it's messy, right? Let's just go and assign owner access to everyone, because it makes it so much easier. Then everyone can just change the Azure resources and everything will be good. So we don't have to mess around with all of this access stuff. This is exactly how access worked in Azure before role-based access control. Remember, you could either be an owner of a subscription or a co-owner, right? A co-administrator was the word they used. A co-admin, right? And if you were a co-admin, then you had access to everything, which is completely bonkers. So people were creating their own sort of fake hierarchies of access control by using more subscriptions, right? It's just crazy. So the disgruntled employee story is another one, anyone can go in and copy any data off anywhere because everybody has access. That's a good idea, you think? How compliant do you think that is with a security audit? Not at all. Anyone ever, moment of truth. Has anyone ever deployed the development connection string to production? Right? Yeah, I've done it. I have done it, and then it's like, oh shoot, that was the wrong connection string. You have to go and fix, because the wrong person is doing it. In fact, the problem is that a person is doing it. It should be a service which is doing that. So all of those are face palms or in Azure, you can automatically log whenever you're doing anything, it's automatically logged, right? The auditing feature is already in place, but not many people are actually looking at that. There are pre-made roles that you can use, reader, contributor, and so forth, and you can enable control over who has access to specific actions within your organization. I have a great anecdote for that in a minute. We're going to make it all the way to that anecdote before we end. So the Azure Active Directory controls access to your Azure subscription. And in Azure, you go and click on the little people symbol. Little people of security is where you click to get into your access control. So for this resource group that we have here, there's the access control button to click on. And in here is where you change access control. They recently changed this UX here. I gave some feedback on that. Usually what I want to see first is the role assignments. See who has access here to this resource. There's not many things that have it. But yeah, that's where you do it. And that's where you should be headed if you are not actively doing that much. Now, this system allows very granular permissions. You can assign permissions to users, individual people, to groups, and to service principals. So you can have deployments happening by a deployment server, and that has access to your resources. Okay? The whole setup is that there is a role definition and a role assignment, and the reason why I bring that up today is because the definitions and the assignments are resources, are things that you can express in JSON. So you can have a bunch of custom roles that you have created, and you can store them as JSON, and you can apply them to your resources with a simple script. So the role definition describes what you're allowed to do, specific permissions, and the assignment is to take that role definition and give it a scope. The scope can be a subscription, a resource group, even down to a resource. And then always attach whatever identity has these permissions. And that's inherited across. So if you give someone one permission on the subscription level, they get it for all resources and all resource groups on your subscription. The scope concept as such is this. I'm moving quite quickly through this now. So It's an hierarchy thing, and access is inherited. So you'll see you have Scott Guthrie up there at top with the red shirt, and then you have leader of your organization there, and then you'll have maybe somebody on a mid-level which has access to a fewer set of resources, and then down to maybe a team. You'll see this is a developer guy right here because he has a shirt that says 404, black shirt, so he's a developer. If you bore down and go into roles under access control, you can find the exact access that you have for a specific access, for a specific role. And you can also find, again, this audit log, this audit history of whenever anyone tried to do anything, you'll see exactly who did it. And it's actually also JSON. And if you have an audit scenario where you have to be compliant with something, you can go and dig out this data, this audit log data, and maybe long-term store it if you need for compliance reasons within your organization. Not that anyone will ever go back and look at it, but it's compliance data, so you'll probably put it in blob storage somewhere and forget about it. But at least the data is there. What I want to give you is sort of a suggested approach for how to apply this within your organization, okay? You don't have to do this, but this has proven to be pretty handy. If you have a part of your organization that maybe needs to have access to a certain set of resource groups, what you would do is you would create an organizational unit, a group within your organization, within your AD, right? You'll create a department group within your AD, and you'll put the people who belong to that department inside of that group. And then you'll go to Azure, and you will create an application or a service-focused group as well. Call it an access group. So this is also a group in the Active Directory that you create for access, and you give this group access to the Azure resources. In this case, it's read access to a certain set of resources, and everybody who is part of that group can read all these resources. And then you put the organizational group inside of the access group. So it's a group within a group. And is that not going to turn into a lot of groups, Magnus? Yes, it's going to turn into a lot of groups. That's correct. That's a good observation. But it's really handy because within your AD, the whole access structure is stored. I know what happens when you go and say, oh, Bob needs to have access to that, resource group. Oh, it's cool. I'll open up the portal and I'll find the resource group and I'll go to the access control and I'll add Bob. 6 months later, Bob quits. And you're still going to see Bob inside of that access. His account is probably suspended and deactivated and all that stuff. But you're going to get a mess of things inside of if you handle it with individual access. So let me give you another example of what we're doing, just so to drive this home. This team needs to have access to the team resources, and in this case, it's going to be contributor access. So you create the team bar group in the AD, and you create also the service one is the thing that this team bar is working on, service one, and you create the service one contributors access group, and then you apply access to the access group in Azure. That thing happens, excuse me, that thing happens in Azure. And then what you do is, again, you assign access for the team to the resource groups, to the access groups that they need to have access to. Okay? I'm going to go really quickly through a story, because I think it's a funny story, and now I'm so happy that I have slides for this. This is the good to great employee story, and it's around privileged identity management, which is available in Azure. I'm going to go over about like 2 minutes or something, just because we had additional great content for these questions. That's right, I'm getting all the 150 beers soon. Anyway, there's a feature called Privileged Identity Management inside of Azure, which you can use. You have to upgrade your version of Active Directory. But coolness in here is that I am able to create specific access now. So the story is that this guy, Dave, he works in my office, okay? Dave needs to put a web application into production. But Dave only has read access on the production website, so he can't do it. He has contributor access to the website slot where he is deploying to. That's cool. So he's deploying to this slot from the build server or something like that, and we're doing final testing in this slot. And what you want to do is, when you're ready, you want to swap that into production, right? There's a swap button you probably know about. So you want to swap staging with production. And the thing is, Bob can't do it. He doesn't have access because we don't allow Bob to have admin access to the production resource. So I've created this little role, this custom role called Web App Slot Swapper, which has the specific access to swap slots. There's a very specific access action that you can do on web applications called swap slots. So I've created a custom role with just one thing in it. And then I went and I assigned with a privileged identity management, I assigned this to Dave. So Dave is now allowed to do this action on this specific resource. It has a scope again, right? And so Dave now, and this is really Dave. This is. Let's see if I can zoom into the right screen here. It's difficult to do with this, but this is Dave, right? It's Dave from the office. He works in my company now. Demo Dave. So Demo Dave, he has a list of eligible roles that he can activate. So he will go and click activate. And when he does, he gets to write a little message to his manager saying, hey, I need to activate, I want to have access to this web app slot swapping thing now, because I'm deploying version 2 because it's way better than version 1. Yeah. Right? And that sends me an email. As his manager, I get an email. I can go and review the request. And the request comes up, and I can look at that, and I was like, okay, Dave wants to deploy something, and I can review Dave's request, and I can write my own justification for that, which is also audited, by the way. And then I can say, all right, cool, you're active. And if Dave now chooses to actually activate the role, he can do so. And then when he comes back from activation, he can go and swap the web app slots and deploy the application. Okay? Privileged identity management is really, really handy. It works mostly good. I haven't seen it work super perfect. I've used it in a few scenarios, but the idea of that is perfect because, Dave specifically doesn't have the access all the time. He doesn't need to have that access all the time. And we can all be a little bit safer knowing that the right person has the right access just in time. And it's actually very helpful. I've talked to a lot of organizations, worked with a company, they had, 600, 700, 800 databases. It's not a huge number, but it's a really big one still. And in order for their service technicians to work with the customer requests, they gave everyone access to all the databases on a permanent basis, which is ludicrous. The time, when you will have the wrong access, it's just going to happen. And you can't actually apply this to databases, but you can apply it to all the Azure resources. So the end with that, and because we're short for time now with this lovely lunch ahead of us, I'm going to leave you. We've had some great questions, so if you have more questions, I'm going to be here for the remainder of the conference, and you can talk to me in the halls and so forth. Buy me a beer. And so Azure, it is a big and a very capable platform. Cost will rise, and you will need to get structured. So you should be investing in using these platform capabilities that I showed now. You should use all of that and probably more. And just completely self-serving. I have a workshop that I'm working that I have, which actually teaches this stuff. So in case you want that, I think I might roll that into deliver that sometime in the future here in Finland as well. We'll see. So thank you for your attention, and now go have lunch.